Happy Saturday, everyone. What's going on? This is not a Winged Eagle podcast because I got a busy day today and I don't have time to come up and do a full-blown podcast, talk about the week of wrestling results, all the news, the ratings, interviews, all that stuff. Just really no time for that today. So I thought we would just come up here and do a quick news nuggets segment on the big Cody Rhodes news that broke just what I believe yesterday, along with a very interesting interview this week with Jeff Hardy on the Matt Hardy podcast, and a couple of other news and notes, some information in AEW with Joey Janela and Marco Stunt. We'll probably talk a little bit about that. I do have the SmackDown results written down here. I checked out most of the show last night, but not all, so we might touch on a little bit of that as well. And we're mostly just going to be hanging out in the chat, see what you guys have to say. A lot going on. You guys might be busy. There's March Madness games happening right now, so I understand that a lot of folks' attention is probably diverted this weekend, so I really, and myself included, I didn't really have time to come up here and do a full-blown Winged Eagle podcast, but we will be back to that next week because Wrestlemania is inching closer and closer, and there's going to be more and more to talk about with each passing show. And there may be a lot to talk about now with virtually the confirmation that Cody is coming in and will be present at WrestleMania weekend. Most people expect him to be at WrestleMania in some capacity, whether he's debuting there or if he comes in the week before or, possibly even the night after WrestleMania, which is where a lot of fans wanted to see him originally when this story first broke of him leaving AEW. So we will discuss the good and the bad with Cody signing with AEW, or with WWE, and where he could pop up when we feel like the best place for him to pop up is. And when this story first broke weeks ago, I don't know what live stream it was on, but one of my very first, ideas for Cody Rhodes was laying out the scenario with Seth Rollins. Now, it does look like if Cody works at WrestleMania, it's going to be against Seth Rollins. If not, it might just be a confrontation, but you think a match would have to take place there. And the way I laid all that out a few weeks ago is looking like it might actually happen. So we'll see, how close we get to that. We'll discuss that later when we get into the possibilities, the speculation, and any ideas you guys have about Cody Rhodes and what he could be doing now that he is officially heading to WWE. I've never wavered from my belief of that. As soon as AEW and Cody made the official announcement that he was leaving, I'm not one of those, it's a work people. It's not. It was never a work. I never believed it to be a work. And I've always felt that Cody wouldn't leave AEW unless he really thought there was some potential in WWE. So the fact that he left at all, told me that he was probably going to go take a big money offer from WWE. And why he did that or what his decisions were, that's really his business, not ours. But we will discuss what those reasonings could possibly have been and why he chose to go to WWE. I have my own ideas on that. And it's going to be interesting to see how all of this goes, and the fact that we're in an era once again where wrestling defections happens. And with everything I saw with Cody yesterday and a lot of the fan reaction and response, it's just embarrassing. I just wish people would just have a little bit more fun and appreciate the time period that they're in. I was somebody that lived through the time period of multiple, frequent, constant wrestling defections between WWE and WCW. And regardless of which way the talent was going, it was always really fun and interesting to see somebody associated with one company now on another brand. It was cool. And nowadays, fans get themselves so wrapped up in all the anger and disappointment of it all, they just suck the fun out of everything. So we're going to talk about how fun this really can be if you just shut your fucking mouth and enjoy it. So got a lot of thoughts on Cody. We'll get into that. Also, Jeff Hardy was a guest on the Life of Matt Hardy podcast. John Alba, recent friend of the channel here, did a great job in this interview, and I want to talk a little bit about that later as well, because Jeff revealed a lot about, his excitement for being in AEW right now, how he wrapped up business with WWE, him walking out of that live event, him being released, the Hall of Fame offer, all that stuff was discussed, and him and Matt both paid very touching tributes to Scott Hall, because I believe Jeff Hardy had like his first match ever in the company or something against Hall, and how Scott, who was always associated, with politics and the backstage stuff, really never had any political issues with those two and helped them a lot. So it was a really good listen. It's about an hour and 15 minutes long. So go check it out if you haven't seen it. But we are going to talk about some of Jeff Hardy's comments there. And the only other couple of things I have written down as it relates to AEW is the fact that Marco Stunt and Joey Janela, two of the AEW originals that were there when the company was formed, are likely not returning to the company. And we've talked about this for close to a year now, that we probably are going to see, as AEW signs more and more big stars, some of those initial startup stars, the ones that didn't, find their own way or achieve success, are probably going to be dropped off. That's just the reality of the situation. It doesn't make AEW evil or anything like that. It just makes them a wrestling company. Like, literally, that's it. So I think AEW does have some issues internally. I think they could really benefit from a talent relations department and things like that, which we'll discuss. But in terms of them just opting or choosing to not re-sign somebody that they don't really need anymore, welcome to reality, son. That's just the way it is. So basically, that's what we're going to get into. That's all. I'm anticipating about an hour-long little podcast here, and then I got to get out of here. I got a big night at work. It's a beautiful weekend here in Southern California, and I'm going to have my ass handed to me tonight. So I'm looking forward to that. Big day planned tomorrow night, though. If you want to join us for a classic WrestleMania watch-along, we've been doing these on Sundays. Last Sunday, we did WrestleMania 21, and tomorrow, I finally decided on one. I think it's the perfect one to do. 20-year anniversary of WrestleMania 18. That anniversary, I believe, was on Thursday this past week, the big Hulk Hogan and The Rock match, which many fans, consider one of the greatest WrestleMania matches of all time, not because of the athleticism in the ring, but just as the moment, the iconic moment of the stare down and the fan involvement and how everybody was behind Hogan. And it was just the biggest match in terms of crowd involvement, I think, in the history of wrestling. And it really, really, really was a huge match. So when I was trying to think of all the WrestleManias to do, which one should we watch tomorrow? I think there's really only one choice. So WrestleMania 18, I meant to stick a link down in the description. I believe I forgot, but it is up on my page right now. Just click my name, go over to the YouTube page, and you can see it there. I also put a link in the community tab, and I also put a link on Twitter to the watch along tomorrow. So it's all over the place. Unfortunately, I just forgot to stick it below. So I'm going to start talking about Cody here in just a minute, but I want to shout out everybody in the chat and tell you guys to please hit that thumbs up button if you don't mind. And if you are new to the channel, that little subscribe button, it's right there. It takes one finger. Just mash it and subscribe. You won't be sorry. We are here every Saturday, usually for podcasts. We are here most Sundays for classic pay-per-view watch-alongs and current pay-per-view reviews. We're up here most Mondays as well for Raw reviews, unless the show completely sucks. We're up here every Wednesday for Wednesday night Dynamite watch-alongs, and we do a lot of other videos in between. Speaking of other videos in between, just about finished with one that I'm going to upload this week, I believe, and it's going to be on WrestleMania matches where the wrong guy won. And we basically go through every single WrestleMania and talk about which matches we would have changed. It was a really fun podcast to prepare for, and I'm excited to get that up. It's a Patreon-sponsored review, courtesy of Reese Jones, and that'll be up here in just a few days. I'd say a week max. I will have that to you. But all that's left to do is really editing, and that takes some time, especially when I'm busy all week. So I will work on getting that done and send it out to you guys right in time for WrestleMania, and it should be some awesome WrestleMania content for you. We will do that this week. Other than that, all I have to do is say hello to you guys. Good to see James Jones, Rarely Even, Vash Starwin, Tatanani, Beetle, Nick Musser, Jay, Lil 18, Tatanani, Beetle, Nick, I already got you already, Rodrigo, myself, Jet the Hawk, Chaz, JL, Robert Johnson, Sonic Plays, FRGN, Rarely Even, David Brown, good to see you, man. Hope you are well. I'm fine. Apart from my family got COVID. Sorry to hear that, man. Generally, when one person gets it, they all get it. So best of wishes to all of you. Good to see Ben in here as well, along with Dave and Tony, Karan, Shell Shock, K-Dog's Kennel. Good to see you. Recently turned 40 years old. My God, Kevin, you are old man like me. Straight Edge is in the house as well. Chris, Deshaun, Victor, and Michael. Nice to see my Monkey Wrench friends. We've got Ben Forbes, I Rarely Even, I think I got you, Andy Linnell, Ratnick, Best of the Best, Joe Shipley, Danny, Stone Cold 10X, appreciate that $2. Looking forward to Cody versus Rollins. I kind of am too, and I'm going to get into Cody here a lot in a minute, and I think I'm actually in the minority. I'm bizarrely excited for Cody in WWE, and I'll tell you why. I am. I just, I guess I just have a different way of looking at it. I don't know how to describe it. I'm also going over here to the Super Chats because last night I can't find it. I know it's Off Leather Wings. Last night, in the middle of the night, when I put the link up, he sent in a $5 super chat asking me to rank some wrestlers. Unfortunately, I cannot see the entire message. Yes, I can. And this is from last night from Off Leather Wings. Wants me to rank these 4 in terms of influence: Brett, HBK, Eddie, or Ray. I'm going to go Ray number 1. I'm going to go... Oh, man, that's really tough because I think Brett and Sean, I'm going to go Ray 1, Brett 2, because Brett was the beginning of fans realizing that, at least in WWE, you did a little bit in WCW and NWA, but at least in WWE, small guys could win world titles. Brett was the first one to do that. So I'm going to go Brett on number 2, and then I'm going to go HBK. And I'm going to put Eddie 4. Sorry, that's just the way I feel. But anyway, I owed that to him from last night, so I appreciate that as well. And yes, I am very much looking forward to Cody and Rollins, Stone Cold, and Jimmy Anderson. Good evening. Thank you very much for the generous super chat as well. Happy you are back, as always, from way, way, way across the pond. What's up, Just Alex? Go show Just Alex some love on his channel as well. Good stuff over there. You might want to stick around for my Cody comments too, man. I don't know. You did not seem happy about all of that. But go show Alex some love. Give him a subscribe and all that good stuff. John Alba, welcome, my friend. Just mentioned you a second ago. That was a great podcast, dude. Seriously. I really enjoyed that. I grew up in eastern North Carolina, around the Fayetteville area when Matt and Jeff were teenagers, and I used to see them around, and to see them go from just the indie trampoline guys to their runs through WWE and go through all their problems too, their trials and their tribulations and their heights and their successes and their rock bottoms and the recoveries, and to see where they are out now personally in their lives with their families and being so at peace and happy with what they're doing, still relevant, still over with the audience to this day, now in their umpteenth wrestling promotion, probably going to win championships over there as well. It warms my heart to see that. I was in the building in Fayetteville the night they won their first ever WWE Tag Team titles against the Acolytes, and that blew my mind. The fact that these two kids, we used to see running around all the time, even when they would go to the shows in the Carolinas, they would have their friends, their clique, their posse, showing up there and walking around. I met the Hardy Boyz' dad in the audience many times, just kind of chilling in the arena in Fayetteville, Greensboro, Charlotte, wherever we were. So it was an awesome, awesome watch. So we're going to talk about a lot of Jeff Hardy's comments here in just a minute on that podcast. John did a great job moderating that. Glad you're here, dude. Victor Cologne, thank you as well for the $5. I wish I wasn't pushing carts at work right now, but at least I can listen to the podcast. Earbuds are a blessing. Victor, thank you for being here. I don't know how you managed to send $5 in when you are at work. So that is amazing dedication. I appreciate it, my friend. Nick Musser is here as well. Absolutely, John. Loved plugging that show. I'll plug more of your stuff too. Who else did I get? Mr. All Days Off, did I get you as well? Anyway, yeah, for sure. Omega episode. Yes. I don't think I saw all of that. Right on. Okay, I think I got all the pleasantries out of the way. We got to start getting into the news here because, like I said, we're probably only going to have about an hour to talk about stuff here today. Let's start with the news that broke on Friday. PW Insider was the first one to break the story. Mike Johnson would claim that Cody Rhodes has indeed signed with WWE, was even pretty specific about it, saying he inked the deal about 10 to 14 days ago, and the plan for him internally, at least as of right now, is to debut at WrestleMania weekend, whether that be at the show or maybe the Raw after or whatever. Now, that type of stuff, I believe, can change constantly because I don't think WWE knows what the hell they're doing tonight, much less, what they're going to be doing at WrestleMania. So that will remain to be seen in terms of what his exact plans are. But in terms of the belief that he has signed with WWE, even though there hasn't been, I don't believe as of today yet, official confirmation from WWE or Cody that he's signed, the sources are pretty strong in this one. And Meltzer has been adamant for the past, I don't know how long, that Cody is coming into WWE. And say what you want about Meltzer, when it comes to AEW stuff, he seems to really be in tune with that because everybody claims that he's some AEW shill, remember? So if he's that much in tune with what they got going on, what the hell would he lie about this? So I think that I've never not believed that Cody was coming to WWE. The minute that AEW, Tony Khan, and Cody Rhodes announced officially that they were all parting ways, Sure, that was shocking as hell. Don't get me wrong. I was as shocked as everybody. But the belief that this would have been some sort of a work, I'm like, no, no. I think maybe down the line it could turn into a work or something, but I never really believed it. And when all the parties were coming out and saying that this is it and we're parting ways, I'm like, all signs to me were pointing to Cody going to WWE. I know it sounds crazy since he's one of the founding fathers of AEW. He worked so hard against WWE in those early years, but guess what? That's what everybody did. Everybody back in the day that jumped from WWE to WCW would trash the competition a lot of times. Look at the shit that Hulk Hogan said about WWE and Vince McMahon after he left, and vice versa, and even they came back together. So it doesn't matter what is said. This is really nothing different in terms of the grand scheme of things in history. Wrestlers sticking up for the team that they play for and then jumping ship for a better deal. Scott Hall and Kevin Nash, their matches and their moves were used in the Billionaire Ted skits. And then 3 months later, they jumped to WCW. So I don't really think that Cody has betrayed anybody. I don't think Cody has betrayed the AEW audience or anything like that. I think Cody's a businessman. I think Cody is here to make himself and his brand and his name as big of a success as possible. And like WWE or not, and I know a lot of times we don't like WWE on this channel, they drive us absolutely crazy. I much prefer AEW's product to WWE, but that doesn't change the fact that you're going to get more exposure in WWE. And Cody really seems to be one of these guys that wants to be like, have the reality shows and do that kind of stuff. He's going to get more opportunities like that in WWE. He's going to be able to be on Jimmy Fallon and, and Jimmy Kimmel and all this other crap that a lot of WWE stars do in these public appearances, and maybe a lot of that factored in to his decision because he's got more aspirations than just being an in-ring wrestler. He wants to do other things too, and WWE can be a good bridge to that. So for Cody, it might really be a better fit for him, even though it goes against everything he's kind of said in the past 3 years. Things change, and sometimes you don't feel the same way you did 3 years ago. I know I don't about a lot of stuff. So I think everybody should back off on Cody, the people attacking him for signing with WWE. Let him go there and see what he does. I think Cody is also smart enough to probably protect himself a bit in the contract negotiations and whatnot. And, hopefully he's got some outs or some clauses, or he's got some things that he wanted or demanded. Because when you're in a position like that where two companies want you, you've got some interesting leverage there. You can maybe command or demand things that you wouldn't necessarily get, like the Adam Cole stuff. He's like, yeah, if I do stay here, I'll tell you one thing right now. I'm twitching, and you ain't stopping me. So take me or leave me, that kind of thing. So I really like it when wrestlers find themselves in that position to where they can actually get some things contractually that they want. I don't believe creative control is anything we want to start doing again. But in terms of, because it already happens a little bit as it is, but in terms of the little things, Cody having protections in there in the contracts to where if things go sideways or south, he can get out of there if he wants. Who knows? But at the end of the day, WWE is not a horrible place for him. WWE probably also wants Cody for the fact that they haven't really been able to celebrate very much, maybe as much as they've wanted to, the legacy of Dusty Rhodes. WWE are huge Dusty Rhodes marks. Have you noticed that? I'm a Dusty Rhodes mark too. He's my first ever memory of professional wrestling, seeing him wrestle superstar Billy Graham. So WWE now has a chance to maybe celebrate Dusty's legacy a little bit more, because it's really tough to do that when his two sons are working for the competition. So if they bring Cody in and they can have, they are really going to play on that Dusty stuff. You watch. I tell you, when Cody gets there, not that he doesn't mention his dad at all or anything like that. Of course he does in AEW, but they are really going to make the grandson of a plumber, the son of the American dream, a big deal. They are going to constantly, he's going to be Charlotte, they're going to constantly, I think they might want to almost replace Ric Flair with Dusty in a lot of ways, just because of what an ass Ric Flair has made out of himself. And Dusty was such an integral part of those early days of NXT. And of course, they have the Dusty Classic tournament and all of that. So Cody coming in, I think, will have also a lot to do with how WWE continues to present the legacy of Dusty Rhodes. And I'm a big Dusty fan. So the more we get to talk about Dusty, the happier I am. So I'm kind of cool with it in that respect. Creatively, in terms of what he does, I don't know. It's going to be up to WWE. You would think that Cody would want things written into the contract. You got to guarantee me a run with a title or something, so maybe he actually has a WWE title run in him. I don't think it's out of the question. I don't think it's out of the question for Cody to hold a championship in a company that has two of them. So sure, he might not be beating Roman Reigns or Brock Lesnar, but he might be beating the other guy. So I wouldn't rule that out either. And I think that would be a big deal for Cody if he was able to achieve that, and achieve that greatness. And I also firmly believe that someday down the road, 5 to 10 years from now, Cody will find himself back in AEW. I think that, he seems to be putting himself first, which I love. Because after everything that he made the fans think about and feel towards him in terms of AEW, for him to turn around and sign with WWE now is very shocking. So who's to say he just can't turn around and tell them to peace out in a few years too? Get what he needs out of them, get his money, get his payday, get a movie deal, a talk show deal, or something like that might be a little bit better than what AEW was able to give to him, and then he can renegotiate and come back to AEW. Now Tony Khan, with all of his billions, who apparently, if push came to shove, could probably outbid Vince McMahon on just about anything. And if he gets himself to that point, say, Tony Khan will now do whatever he can to get me away from Vince, and then I'll go take this money. So I really don't have any issue with anybody jumping ship to either company. I don't have really a dog in this fight. When one company sucks and the other one's better, I will say so. And right now, even though it's WrestleMania time, I prefer AEW's product far more over WWE. It's so much easier to watch and just so much better for a wrestling fan. But that doesn't mean I don't want WWE to get better. And anytime I see an opportunity for them to do something interesting on TV, I'm all for it. So I'm interested to see Cody go to WWE and see what he can do there and just see how he's going to be used, how he's going to be treated, what it's going to feel like compared to when he was there in 2016. Is he bringing that music with him? That would be kind of fun for WWE to be like, hey, we can steal theme music too. Suck it, Jeff. What a great counterpunch to, AEW licensing the Hardy Boyz music for them to bring Cody in and use his, if that is his plan, or if he wants to create a whole new WWE theme. I think just for a wrestling fan's perspective, I'm not a huge fan of the Cody song, but if he came out to it, that would be pretty awesome. But he also might want to create a whole different chapter for himself in WWE. They might be working on a new theme song for him right now that might be similar to the one he has or whatever. But I think, if he brought the theme with him, that could kind of be cool just for a fan's perspective, because that's not even something we saw back in the day, because wrestlers really didn't own their own theme music back then. So when WWE guys would jump to WWE or WCW would have to create WCW versions of their WWE theme like they do with Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan and a lot of other guys. So just little tidbits like that, little details like that, to me are very interesting. So we got to see what he's going to do. I'm really excited to see when he pops up, when he shows up, and when the right time for that is. Now, Fightful Select provided an update earlier today on Cody, and there's been a lot of talk since then about him coming in, WWE having plans for him at WrestleMania, travel being arranged for him, that sort of thing. But no, and many WWE officials and sources confirming that he's signed. But Cody and WWE themselves have not really said this yet. That's probably because they're trying to debut him in as much surprising of a way as possible. And that's another reason why I was in strong defense of WWE on Monday night. I saw fans laughing at other fans for getting worked because everybody thought Cody was going to come out and then he didn't come out. And I'm like, and some people are even thinking that like Cody's not coming in. I'm like, are you fucking blind? Can you not see the crystal clear fucking teasing that WWE is doing here? I said on Monday during the Scott Hall tribute, I was like, Cody's coming to WWE. There is absolutely no way WWE would drop all those fucking hints and leave a man like Seth Rollins without an opponent just for him not to come in. What, Seth's just going to sit out WrestleMania? Come on. So if you couldn't see on Monday that he was coming in, I don't know what to tell you. So I didn't really need much more confirmation than that. PW Insider's report just confirmed what I already knew, and that is that Cody is coming to WWE to face Seth Rollins at some point. Now, I guess a month ago. When was the Cody news broke? When did the Cody Rhodes and AEW parting of the ways happen? Like a month ago, maybe more. It was in that very first podcast, that very first episode I did. I laid out this whole scenario for Cody and Seth Rollins, because I said, Seth could find himself without an opponent at WrestleMania, but even back then, even a month ago, we were trying to figure out what the hell is Seth going to do, because I think the Cody news broke the same day as like the Stone Cold news. So We knew Austin was going to be facing or doing something with Owens. What does Seth Rollins do? So I laid out this whole thing. I'm like, what you do is you have obnoxious fucking Seth coming out there, gets on the mic. I'm Seth Rollins. I'm the greatest. And this fucking company didn't even book me in a match. So I'm just going to take matters into my own hands. I'm going to control my own narrative. And I'm going to come out to the ring and be a part of WrestleMania. Anybody can come down here and face me or interact with me or whatever. And, but do this while being extra douchey. I know Seth is kind of naturally a douchebag. He's so good. This is my favorite version of Seth Rollins ever. So if Seth Rollins comes out even more amped up with the volume turned up even more, and he's just screaming, and then Cody's music hits, the one that we're familiar with, and the fans, big pop, 100,000 people. He comes down to the ring, and I'm like, there's such a built-in kind of story here between these two, with Seth acting the way he is, and Cody being the son of the American dream. Cody can get on the mic and say, my dad used to talk about you. My dad used to say the greatest things about you, how you were the future of the business. He was so impressed with your ability, with your professionalism, with how you carried yourself. And he used to just speak so highly of you any chance he got. Because don't forget, Dusty Rhodes was in the ring, right, to present Seth Rollins with the first NXT title. And Cody could say something like, if my dad could see you now, if he could see the douchebag that you've turned into, he'd be rolling over in his grave. Out of respect for my father, I feel like I needed to come out here and shut you up because you are not doing him, his legacy, or the legacy of my family any justice by acting like this. You were his protege. He really saw something in you, and you are desecrating the name of my dad, that type of thing. So he could come out there and then ring the bell, motherfucker. He can come out there in his gear, and then you have a match. Cody crossroads Seth and wins. I mean, are you really going to beat Seth like that, though? That would be a huge statement win for Cody coming in the door, beating somebody of that caliber. But I also think that could spark the beginning of a program. Like Cody's entry-level feud could be with Seth Rollins, and they could do a 3 pay-per-view program. That would be great. WrestleMania could just be the start of it. And then Seth can play the "you caught me off guard" card. I wasn't expecting you to come out. I thought you worked for another company, so he can pretend, kind of like Bianca, said, I wasn't expecting Becky. I was supposed to face Carmella. And this bitch comes out and punches me in the face and beats me 1, 2, 3 in 10 seconds. I wasn't ready, let me go again. But this time you can do it from a heel's perspective. So that could lead to, of course, another match at the next pay-per-view, and maybe even a number 1 contenders deal at some point. I mean, they might hotshot anything they have planned with Cody. If he comes in at WrestleMania, who knows? He might be a fucking champion by SummerSlam. It's very possible. So I think that a guy like Cody would not put pen to paper with WWE unless he knew that they have big plans for him. I don't think he would risk this move from AEW to WWE if he was just any old wrestler who signs their life away. And if they show up to TV one day and they tell you to put on a fucking chicken suit, and go dance a jig in the middle of the ring, you can say, I'm not doing that. So I would think that Cody has got a few more provisions that others might not have. And I would hope, at least I would be, if I was in Cody's situation, I would make sure that I have protections in my contract that protects me from WWE's stupidity. It would be the very first thing I would put in there before money or anything else. I would say, if you guys are idiots, I can leave. I swear to Jesus, that's what I would put in there, because that would be extremely important to me. I don't want my life wasted away, years just burning off my life while this company does nothing with me. I want to be able to get out and live my life. We'll talk about Jeff Hardy too in a minute. On the Matt Hardy pod, he kind of said something similar when he was walking around the halls of WWE wondering, why am I even here? What am I doing here? I'm in my Jeff's my age, it's like, I only have a finite amount of time left. He's lucky to even still be in the ring as it is. So if he feels like he has any time left at all, you need to make the best of that time. So I hate to see people just wasting away, on the WWE roster. They're being spiteful with Ali, just not letting him go. And I'm like, this guy's got, you've got a window, man, in your 30s and early 40s, mid 20s to early 40s is basically every wrestler's window unless you're a megastar. So you got to get in there and work and get your money while you can. And just to purposely, prevent you from continuing your career, I find really gross. So I just hope with Cody, he's got those protections in place. So in my mind, the best place for Cody to debut would probably be at WrestleMania. But you have to wonder, I mean, is Cody Rhodes really going to sell more tickets? You know, if they pre-announce him, like if he shows up this Monday on Raw, by the way, a lot of the reports are saying that he will be on the Raw brand. So if Cody does debut this week on Raw, now we know he's going to be at WrestleMania. Would that really, if they're suffering in ticket sales or they wish they were a little bit higher, is Cody going to sell you 30,000 more tickets? I don't think so. I think he'll sell you 30 more tickets, but not 30,000 more tickets. So I don't know what that would achieve. It might just be more fun for the moment. WWE's way more about moments than they are about stories. That's for damn sure. We can all agree on that. So Cody coming out at WrestleMania, you know, it would be half predictable, but also half welcomed, I think, by the audience. I mean, the whole thing I laid out with Seth Rollins, that would be pretty obvious, would it not? I mean, if Seth Rollins' music hits and he came down there and started on the mic, the fans are going to be chanting Cody before his theme music shuts off. I mean, it's like they're going to know it's Cody right from the word go. So it's tricky. You know, you got to wonder, I'm like, okay, how do we do this? Is it okay if it's predictable? A lot of fans are expecting to come in, so might as well just bring him in. But do we want to make it too predictable, or do we want to punch him in the face with something? And I think that's what WWE was trying to do this past Monday with us when they were constantly teasing us and then it didn't happen. That's good. To watch fans laugh and get mad at each other or be angry or then laugh at the other fans who were expecting them. I'm like, WWE is doing this. They are actually trying. Can't believe I'm actually about to praise WWE here, but they're actually trying to keep the fans on their toes and give us Cody when we least expect it. And definitely don't give him to us when we most expect it. And I think a lot of fans on Monday thought that with that match on the line with Kevin Owens and Seth Rollins, when Seth lost, that we'd probably see Cody, and we didn't. So they're just holding it off a little bit longer. Now it could happen this coming Monday. How many more Raws do we have? This Monday's not go home. So we'd have the next, so there's 2 more Raws left, right? The Monday after this one will be the go home. So maybe that could be the Cody spot. Either way, we got at least 2 shows now where the WWE can fuck with us. And don't get mad about that. Be happy about that. Be happy that the WWE isn't phoning this shit with Cody in. They're playing around with it. They're dropping hints to the fans. You know, they're leaving a little breadcrumb trail to Cody. And to me, that's what you should do. You should have fun with it and try to keep the fans in the internet age now, in the age of information and us knowing every single little fucking detail about everything, being able to surprise us at all is going to be a win for either company to pull off. So whenever Cody comes, I don't really care, to be honest. I don't believe there's a right place to do it, because when I talked to people last month, everybody was saying, a lot of people were saying this. Everybody felt like the Raw after WrestleMania was the best place for Cody. It would be awesome, don't get me wrong, but is that really the best place for him? You know, because the Raws after Mania the past few years, I feel like that, much like the Hall of Fame, I feel like the magic is over. Like, it's done. So I don't believe that the Raw after Mania would even really be that big of a deal if Cody came, because by then we would really be expecting it. Know what I mean? So I just think the better moment would be to be at WrestleMania. That's what I would want if I was Cody. If I'm contractually free and able to work a WrestleMania match, I want to work that WrestleMania match. I don't want to skip it. Fuck that. You know, I know Brock did and some other guys did to come in the next night. Goldberg, same thing. But Cody, well, actually Goldberg, they announced at WrestleMania, I believe, that he was coming in, and then he showed up the next night. But with Cody, I would probably either do it at WrestleMania or I would do it on the go-home Raw. Those are the 2 that I think would be the best. Night after Mania would be great and all, but, and I still think it could happen. I absolutely could see Cody showing up the night after WrestleMania on Raw. Absolutely. But, you know, I almost think it would be better for us to see him prior to that. Either way, there's no right or wrong answer. Either way, the fans have got no business getting their panties in a bunch over when, where, or how he debuts. If he debuts and he loses to fucking Happy Corbin, then yeah, I might be a little bit pissed. But in terms of anything else, I don't believe any fan knows the right way to do it. We might have ways we prefer to see, you know, but I don't really think we're going to know if it's the right answer or not until we see it happen. You'll know then. You'll know based on the crowd reaction. You'll know based on the moment that it creates if it was right or wrong. So you really don't know until that happens. I have my ideas of where I think it would get the best reaction, but you never know. You know, if there is one thing I missed, it's the Raws after Manias. They have been shit the past few years when they used to be so incredibly fun. And like I said after Revolution, AEW does Raws after Mania better than WWE does, because every time we see a Dynamite after a pay-per-view, shit always goes down. And the Wednesday night after Revolution, we saw a heel turn, we saw a debut, and we saw a title change. And those are things that we've come to expect from WWE after big pay-per-views and stuff. Now AEW's doing it. So WWE does have a chance, the Raw after Mania, if they have anything else in their back pocket too, they could use that to balance the Cody thing out, make the fans think they're seeing Cody, and then hit us with something else. If there's some other free agent or big name out there, maybe a return, Asuka, Bayley, something like that, could come back in on the night after Mania as well and make a big splash. There's lots of things that you could do. Doesn't have to be Cody. So we will see. All I can say is that I wish Cody the best. Cody is, ever since Cody ended racism, I know that there's not really much to worry about, but we still have a lot of problems in this world. And despite some of our issues that we have with Cody, he's a little bit self-indulgent and he's really wrapped up in himself and he does like the spotlight and he does make us chuckle a little bit in his promos. I've always liked Cody. I'm a gigantically enormous fan of his father, and I've met Cody. He's been nothing but nice and nothing but professional. I've always enjoyed his ring work. And overall, Cody's not on my top 10 favorite wrestlers or anything, but I certainly don't hate Cody, never have. If the worst reaction Cody ever got out of me is me rolling my eyes. I'm like, oh, brother, here we go again. That's it. 2 years ago yesterday was the anniversary of wrestling shutting down, the pandemic hitting. Even my restaurant shut down on that day as well. And that was when we had Cody cutting that promo in AEW. He was basically in the role that John Cena would have been in WWE doing the same thing. And for him to speak to all of us, that was a scary time. You guys remember, we had just gone into lockdown. We're like, what the fuck is going on? None of us knew what the hell to expect. And for Cody to be the one to do that in just an empty arena with one cameraman talking to a million people is, it's crazy. So he's created a hell of a lot of buzz in the past month or so. And to me, that's the fun of it. And that's what I tried to talk about a little bit yesterday on Twitter too, is that I lived through the Monday Night Wars. I lived through the WWE and WCW war, and the way talent would jump from one company to the other was a constant thing. It constantly happened. Sometimes you'd be a little bit bummed. Sometimes you'd be disappointed, but you were rarely going nuts over it. I mean, if Twitter would have existed back then, I don't know what it would have looked like when Hall and Nash jumped and when Luger jumped and when Rick Rude jumped. I mean, these fans can't even handle contracts expiring. Cody's contract was up. He didn't resign. He departed AEW, and fans feel betrayed, and he disappointed them, and he went against what he said. Welcome to fucking pro wrestling, assholes. Have you ever watched pro wrestling before? How much experience do you have watching this shit? 1 month? Because if you go through history, this has always happened. When you have guys jump from another to another promotion, they always talk shit. It always looks like they're being hypocrites. Always. Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan, those guys going over there, Hall and Nash, every defection basically in history, regardless of which way they went, to me was always just about business and wrestlers taking opportunities. One of the things I preach the most is to choose opportunities over your dreams. You'll be more successful that way. And I think a lot of wrestlers doing that back in the day. I think today it's been 20 years since WWE wasn't a monopoly. So I have to understand that fans are just young. They don't remember the fact that this is nothing new. And now that we have another promotion out there for wrestlers to bounce back and forth to, you think Cody's going to be the last one? There's going to be all sorts of guys. We've already seen a ton. Bryan Danielson, same thing. People were saying the same thing about him when his contract was up with WWE and then he went to AEW. He betrayed WWE. Same shit people are saying about Cody. And I find it hilarious that, with this situation, the AEW haters are giving shit to the WWE haters for being all emotionally all over the place about Cody, as if they aren't equally as fucking stupid when the reverse happens. Like when Danielson signed with AEW. Don't be fronting like you're better. You ain't. Both of these camps are equally fucking stupid. And both of these camps, I think, rob themselves of enjoying professional wrestling. If you just sit back and enjoy these things, you will be a way more happier wrestling fan. Let people jump back and forth. It's part of wrestling. It's part of what makes it fun. Wrestling was at its peak, at its height of popularity, when guys were just fucking jumping all over the place. Contract would be up, sign with the other company, guy gets released, signed with the other company, or maybe somebody's working without a contract and shows up on Raw or Nitro unannounced. like Lex Luger did and Rick Rude did. So I think if there was a Twitter back in the day, I put this on Twitter today. I said, if there was a Twitter back in 1994 when Vince McMahon came on Raw and basically told us in so many words that Randy Savage was going to WCW, I would have been tweeting like an unhinged maniac. I am so glad that this app exists when I'm in my 40s and not when I'm in my teens, because honestly, in all fairness, I'd be saying equally as dumb shit as I see from these people that are so wrapped up in this idiot war with WWE and AEW. I'm like, just fucking have some fun, man. Cody going to WWE is interesting. I like interesting stuff. I like weird stuff. I like stuff that I didn't expect to see a year ago. I talked about a lot about that in AEW when Punk and Danielson got there in the summer. I'm like, rewind 1 year earlier and tell yourself that you would see Bryan Danielson and CM Punk both in AEW within 12 months. You would have said, no way. CM Punk's been invisible for the past, he's disappeared off the wrestling planet for the past 8 years. And Danielson just main evented a WrestleMania. No, that's not going to happen. And here we are. So I think regardless of which company is able to pull off interesting shit, it's interesting nonetheless. So Cody going to WWE will be a fun thing to watch unfold. And honestly, it might be a little bit more interesting than what he was doing in AEW. And hell, man, think about the long-term storyline implications of this if he does return to AEW one day, because he still has that match that he lost. He can never challenge for an AEW title again. So if he comes back in 5 years, they will surely bring that up, and he might have to have a match that will give him that right again. I believe Cody will be AEW champion one day. I absolutely do. So we will, unless his time here in WWE goes exquisitely well, unless they love him, he loves them. He's got a great relationship with Vince McMahon. He's being pushed. You know, the only people in the company maybe with a higher spot than him are like Brock, Roman, and maybe one or two others. I mean, other than that, he is right up there, and he sees no reason to leave. He might very well resign. And another thing about his signing is that, you know, this is going to be something for a lot of talent to watch. It's how WWE handles this could determine a lot of other people jumping ship down the line. You know, if WWE like I said, I think Cody's already protected himself from being buried in shit, but if WWE brings him in and uses him like shit, that's going to help AEW, because when AEW's wrestlers' contracts come up, they're like, well, I'm not going over there. They couldn't even fucking figure out how to push Cody, so I'm not going there. I'll just re-sign with AEW. But if Cody goes there and achieves megastar status, that might be something for a lot of AEW talent to look at when their contracts are up. So I think Cody's success in WWE will determine a lot of free agent signings in the future. Let's just put it that way. So it's a significant move for this new era. You know, WWE has a new competitor now in AEW that's playing the role of WCW in a lot of ways as their top number one competitor. So, you know, this is going to be a very significant defection in terms of how it's handled and how his run goes and, you know, the success of it. If it's a success, it's really going to help WWE for attracting other talent if they want it. If it's a complete flop, it's only going to solidify that professional wrestling is AEW is the place for professional wrestling, where WWE just grows people in their multicolored NXT system and throws them out on TV and gives them title belts. It's two completely different philosophies. So we will see how this plays out. I'm excited. I know I spent fucking 45 minutes talking about that, but I felt like it was important because I think it's going to go down in history in the AEW and WWE era of wrestling as a really significant defection. This is going to be right up there with Luger, you know, maybe not a Hogan, but it's going to be up there with a Luger, you know, or maybe even a Brett or somebody like that, because, you know, Brett was horribly mismanaged. You know, WCW got the hottest wrestler in the world and pissed it away. I think WWE has the ability to be that stupid. So let's hope that they don't. And let's hope that Cody finds success back home. This might have been his plan all along. You know, go to AEW, go venture outside of WWE, build up yourself enough to where they want you now. And they're offering you money, and that puts you in the driver's seat. And that might have been Cody's deep down motivation all along. And can't fault him one bit for it, if that's the way he felt. So, anywho. Let me know what you think about the Cody situation in the chat. I want to get into Jeff Hardy's comments now, finally, on the Matt Hardy podcast, but I figured we had to open with Cody. I want to appreciate the host of that podcast, John Alba, stopping by in the chat earlier on. He's probably gone now, but we are finally going to be getting into Jeff Hardy's comments because they were interesting. Let me see if there's any super chatties up here I need to knock out before we get into the Jeffster. Chris Miner, appreciate the $5. Wouldn't shock me if WWE is going to change his name gimmick as an unknown wrestler named Brick Brackman. I'm kidding, but hope he gets treated well. Yeah, he's not going to do that. Cody's another guy that's safe because WWE wants him to use the Rhodes name because of Dusty. But that is funny if they were bring him in and change his name like that or something. My God, I'm not ruling out a return to the Stardust gimmick for fun. I don't think he's going to be Stardust permanently, but I think maybe 1 week we could see him as Stardust. Totally think that's possible. Yeah, Alex, you bring up a good point. The one thing about YouTubers like us, too, is the Cody stuff gives us shit to talk about. It gives us views. It gives people, it gives people a reason to tune into your shit, because there's something interesting to talk about. That's why this whole podcast is just centered around Cody mostly and a little bit of Jeff Hardy, where if I was running through those shitty matches on SmackDown last night, who cares? This is juicier. This is more fun. So anytime something like this happens, it's good for YouTubers because it helps our business. So I got no issues at all with Cody doing what he did. Luigi, appreciate the $2. Which night does Cody come out? We were just talking about that. I mentioned that I think Go Home Raw or WrestleMania would be the best spot. Night after Raw after Mania would be great and all, but I almost think I want Cody at Mania. I think that'd be cool to see him there. So it's hard to decide what's the best place for him. I wouldn't want to be that decider, you know what I'm saying? Or that decision maker. Well, that's good. You got to be open about working it out. Like I've said time and time again with Cody, he's not fucking stupid. So he would not come to WWE if they were going to change his name to Butch and make him wear a little hat and dance in the ring. He is going to protect himself and make sure that he is safe from WWE's stupidity. That's what I said. And otherwise, if he thought that was going to be, if he was really risking serious career suicide by signing with WWE and all the creative shit they've been known to do, then I think he would have just stayed in AEW. So I'm sure these discussions have already been talked about, and I'm sure Cody has covered his ass. At least that's what I think. All right, I think that's got the super chats caught up. Yeah, exactly. If WWE wants a chance to maybe get some of their other talent back that they maybe want to have back again, or any sort of big star whose contract comes up, whether it be WWE or AEW, how Cody is treated could play a role in the decision of future talents. You know what I mean? Chris Ludecky, appreciate the $5 from you as well. I feel Cody has done a great job making himself relevant, but this doesn't feel as a big get for WWE as it could have been if Cody had been champ. Maybe. Cody being champ would have helped, but I still think it wouldn't have played that much of a role. I do agree with, it's not like there's no reason to compare this to Hogan. I saw somebody responded to me on Twitter yesterday when I was like, chill out about the Cody thing. No reason to be mad. And somebody was like, you could tell this person was fucking 11 years old. And they were like, well, I think the reason they're mad is because, Cody could have been the biggest defection since Brett or something that compared his defection to Brett or Hogan and whatever it was. And I was like, no, there's no comparison between Cody's jumping to WWE and Hogan and Brett jumping to WWE. Those were business changing events and defections where Cody is just business is going to keep on moving. World's going to keep spinning, and the two companies are going to keep existing the same way they always have. Hogan drastically changed things for WCW when he came in, and in a lot of ways, so did Brett, based on how horribly he was used and how that really, in turn, what should have been the death knell for WWE turned out to be their success, bringing in Tyson and crowning Austin at Mania, and WCW doing dick with Brett. So, it's not the same. Cody's a big get, but he's not a Hogan-sized get. And I was really surprised that somebody compared him to that. Victor, Cody should come out at night 1 and night 2. Oh, come out night 1 and night 2 to wrestle. Okay. Appreciate that $2 from you. Maybe show up at night 1, challenge Seth to night 2. That could work. That would be a way to get him introduced before you actually have the match or something. But I feel like if Cody and Seth are in the ring on night 1, you're just going to do the match there. But it could be. That could work. Trey Williams, come on, Greg, 11 years old. Well, my point was, though, Trey, is whoever this was is too young to remember wrestlers defecting, because nobody who was alive for Hogan's defection would compare this to Cody. You're just too young. So if he made that comment, that means he either doesn't know what he's talking about, or he just wasn't fucking born when that happened. But it is not the same thing, and it's not even the same goddamn universe, because I know I was there. Anywho, can we talk about Jeff Hardy now, please? Jeff Hardy this past week was a guest on the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy podcast. This is hosted by John Alba, who just did a great job, I think, terrific job moderating this interview. He just stopped by in the chat here a little while ago to say hi and listen to the whole thing. I thought it was really good. It's about an hour and 15 minutes long. I'm not going to do any exact quotes here. I'm basically going to paraphrase a lot of what Jeff said and Matt said as we go through this. But there was some pretty interesting information coming out in this interview. Now, they opened up with some really nice Scott Hall memories. I really like that, because both of these guys had worked with Razor Ramon back in like 94 in WWE when they had little rat tails and their short hair and their 16-year-old little hicks in North Carolina. So great. And especially Jeff got his just bell rung against Scott. And they talked about their interactions with him backstage, about some of the advice and the things he said to them. And then when WCW was bought out and Scott came back in 2002 with the NWO, for him to see them then and and how they had made, he's like, oh man, see you guys. He hadn't seen them since before they became anything. So for him to come back to the WWE and see them now as huge stars was a pretty big trip for Scott Hall. So it was heartwarming to know that Scott Hall just had a good relationship with the Hardy Boys, because they're a couple of guys that you would sometimes feel like guys like that could be victims of the clique in some sort of political way. And the fact that Scott was always cool with them was pretty awesome. I just liked hearing about some of those memories. So along with their plans, in the future, their lives, a lot of the Broken Matt stuff, a lot of what they did in TNA and Impact, and some of their future projects and upcoming appearances, what everybody probably wanted to hear about really was Jeff Hardy and his departure from WWE. And they had talked for about an hour before they got into that. And when you just saw Jeff and Matt's demeanor throughout that hour, that was what made me the happiest, because after Jeff left WWE, there was those talks of him relapsing and everything like that. And even though it came out right away that it really wasn't the case, Jeff has honestly kind of a bad track record. So a lot of fans were, some were worried and some were maybe even slightly angry that he might have had another issue after how many chances he has received. But it didn't take long for truth and things to come out about this that might not necessarily been the way it was on the surface. And when you see Matt and Jeff just speaking the way they are, talking about their lives, talking about their families, sitting by side after all these years in the business, both of them are alive. Both of them have overcome, the problems and the issues they had, and they're in such a much better place, and they are at peace, and they seem both legitimately super excited to be in AEW, because they continued to get this run, the Hardy Boys, back together as a tag team with the old Hardy Boys music and the old Hardy Boys gear. We saw that 3 days ago on TV. Like, to me, that's mind-blowing that it's 2022 and this stuff is still a possibility, considering how long they've been in the business, and for them to remain relevant, to remain over. It's awesome to see the happiness in their face and to hear the excitement in their voice. And it was just awesome for me. I remember them when before they were even wearing the Young Buck shit, before they were even wearing that type of gear, when they were just jobbers with short hair. I remember them. So to see them evolve then into that early Hardy Boys persona where they were kind of dressing, a little bit Young Bucks and rockerish. And then they hooked up with Michael Hayes and they started dressing the way that they've pretty much remained ever since, and all the different variations of heel turns, singles runs, title runs, returns to the company, everything they've been through, all these chapters, to see them back here together, like full circle in another wrestling company with another run, is pretty cool. And Matt had revealed, I think on one of his previous live streams, that AEW extended and matched his contract up with Jeff so they can expire together. And I just think that's awesome. And Hardys have got a lot of appearances. AEW is allowing them to work appearances. I think they have the one today, today, 19th in South Carolina. And they've got stuff going on constantly. And the fact that AEW allows them the freedom to do that is so great. Can't tell you, as somebody who used to live in their neck of the woods and used to see them as kids And through all their fucking problems, to see where they are now is a heartwarming thing to see. But like I said, I was interested to hear the details about Jeff Hardy actually leaving the WWE, him being released, and what took place at that live event. And Matt had basically talked a lot about this after it happened too, letting all the fans know that Jeff wasn't wasted. He wasn't on drugs. He didn't, do anything. Jeff was just being Jeff. That's the way Jeff operates. He's a very much live in the moment guy. And that's what he said here when John asked him about, I got to ask you about your WWE departure. Matt's talked a lot about this, but we haven't heard your side of the story yet. And he basically just said in the match, his part in the match was done. He got in the ring, took his heat, and realized that he's just going to go. He's not needed for the finish anymore. And he hopped the barricade and left. And he said it did turn out to be way more serious of a thing than he thought. He was assuming this was just one more Jeff Hardy type of thing he can do and get away with. But WWE really overreacted and, wound up releasing him. But he went on to say that when John pressed him with the question a lot of fans had, did you do this on purpose? Did you do this knowing it would get you released? He said no, he really didn't do it trying to get released. But when the release happened, in retrospect now, he calls it the best decision of his life. Hopping the barricade and leaving through the audience that night at that live event was the best decision he has ever made, because it now landed him in AEW. It landed him in a place where he feels valued and appreciated. A lot of what he was talking about prior to his WWE departure was how he was really not being used much. He talked about being at SummerSlam. They brought him into SummerSlam. I was at SummerSlam in Vegas. Big crowd. But he was just backstage walking around. He wasn't doing anything at all. And he's just like, why am I here? And he said he felt that way a lot of times when he would be at a show, at a Raw or a TV, and just there walking around the halls, felt like an outsider or a loner. Like, well, what am I even doing here? So he went on to say that the plan was that he was going to go to AEW when his contract was up. He said AEW people would ask him, hey, how much longer you got? And he goes, less than 2 years. So the plan, provided his body held up, was for him to finish out his time in WWE and then go try to have a run in AEW. But at Jeff's age, and himself in the interview in the podcast mentioned that he's not in the greatest shape. He's still he's in great shape, but he's still very banged up. And he's not, 1999 Jeff Hardy anymore. I'm glad that he was able to get out early and maybe preserve and get himself an extra year or two that he might not have gotten if he came to AEW 2 years from now. And who knows where Matt Hardy would have been at that point in the company, how much they would have been using him or the direction of the company at all. So the fact that he was able to get in here now when he did and debut, I'm so happy this happened the way it did. So it turned out to be the best decision he ever made, even though there was no premeditation or motivation in his decision. He wasn't attempting to get anything specific. That's just the way it worked out. And he's like, oh, this is fucking great. Now he also went on to talk a little bit about that Hall of Fame offer. Now, his comments here really, I guess they didn't surprise me, because I knew we had heard that Jeff was pretty turned off by the Hall of Fame offer. And even the fans, we could all see it. It was transparent as hell what WWE was trying to do. However, I didn't realize that it was as offensive to Jeff as it was. And that's kind of what he said. He said it offended him so badly, he was almost in tears over it because it was so incredibly transparent. He was like, I'm going to AEW, so what are you telling me? I can come into the company and go into the Hall of Fame, and you're just going to be okay with me going to AEW? And I guess it was then that they kind of were trying to tie a Hall of Fame induction into like a new contract for him and kind of dangle that in front of him. And WWE's so completely out of touch and fucking tone deaf in certain situations. He was just like, yeah, that's a hard no. You got to be out of your mind if you think I would take that, because the Hall of Fame, we already know, as much as I do love the old days of the Hall of Fame, we do know that it is pretty much a joke. It's a bunch of people sitting around a table deciding who they're going to put in. Nothing's voted upon. There's no baseline for credentials that you need to have. It's just about who they choose to put in that year. And for them to be willing to do a throwaway Hall of Fame induction for Jeff Hardy, let's just give him the Hall of Fame to get him back in, is offensive. I can see that too. I mean, the Hall of Fame I know is a joke, but the Hall of Fame was still, especially prior to 2019, for me, was one of my favorite nights of WrestleMania weekend, because everybody that got on the Hall of Fame or went into the Hall of Fame, I grew up watching for most, in most cases. So it was a lot of fun for me, and I still want some prestige of the Hall of Fame to remain intact, despite the joke that it is. And Jeff said that he believes him and Matt should go in together. I believe that too. I also believe both of these guys, Jeff especially, is a singles Hall of Fame worthy wrestler as well, because he's held world titles in multiple promotions. He's hugely over. He's been one of the more consistently over people in wrestling's history. Really, he has. I mean, he did have a heel run in TNA, but he never really had a heel run in WWE, did he? I mean, he was always just marketable. Everybody loved him. Kids really loved him. Women loved him. Dudes loved him. You know, when you can be loved by all sorts of ages, groups, sizes, and sexes of humans, that is a pretty rare thing to have. And Jeff was over and still is with everybody. So I firmly believe that he should go in the Hall of Fame on his own, but I also believe it should be up to the Hardys how they want to do it. I believe they both deserve singles inductions, like I said, especially Jeff, and they definitely deserve to go in as a team, obviously. So I would let it be up to them when the time comes. For once, WWE should, allow some people to choose their own destiny and say, and call up the Hardys one day, 5 years from now, hey, why don't you go in the Hall of Fame? What do you want to do? What do you want to do first? You want to go in individually, or you want to go in as a team? And I believe personally they should go in as a team. That's what I believe. I think they should go in as a team first, and then Jeff should have his induction because Jeff is, Jeff's influential. I think Jeff's championship runs were due largely in part to the road that was paved by Rey Mysterio Jr. and a lot of other small wrestlers, high flyers like that are all of a sudden winning world championships. That's really, really, really crazy that somebody like Jeff, especially somebody who I remember Jeff to be, getting a 16-year-old kid, getting the snot beaten out of him by Razor Ramon on Raw. This kid is WWE champion now. That's mind-blowing. It's fucking mind-blowing. So I believe that Hall of Fame is in both of their futures, and they should both be two-timers, two-time Hall of Fames each, 100%. So it was nice to watch that podcast. Like I said, check it out if you have not yet already. I've got the link attached to it, I think, on my Twitter, if you want to look it up over there, or just go to YouTube and search it. Check it out. It's fun just to see the Hardy Boys relaxed, chilling, still earning big money in wrestling, at the age that they are in, and still being relevant as they are. And hopefully their time in AEW translates into some great stuff. Maybe the Hardy Boys run as a tag team is brief. They get a little run, maybe even with the titles, or get some dream matches in. You got to get I know they've had matches with the Bucks before, but they've never had one on TV, I don't think. So you should put them in there with them and do some matches, maybe some dream matches, get those out of the way, and then maybe think about, giving Jeff a little run there. See what happens. So I think he's going to sell. He already has an action figure out, apparently, so he's going to sell a ton of merch for AEW and action figures and a lot of T-shirts and stuff like that. Jeff is marketable. AEW's lucky to have him. So best of luck to both Hardys in the company. Really enjoyed the interview. And the last little note I have on them is what Matt and Jeff basically both said this, and I agree, and that is a lot of the treatment of the legends in AEW is different. They have a better value for the legends. They use them more. When WWE brings in the legends, sure, they honor them, but they're usually just paraded out there with a diva on their arm or doing something silly or just standing there doing nothing, or whatever they do, they don't do anything. I like the fact that AEW utilizes legends in managerial roles. It sounds like Bret Hart might be coming in to manage FTR. And if that happens, I'm not even sure what I'm going to do. I'm not going to be able to contain myself. So then that's the way it was back in WWE back in the day. A lot of the managers were former wrestlers, Fuji and Brain and a lot of guys. So AEW kind of doing that in modern times, I like to see, even though Tully got fired. I like to see Tully there and Jake and Taz, potentially Bret Hart now. If Ric Flair wasn't such a dirty son of a bitch, I would love to see him come in, and do something with a Horseman or a Horseman-like faction or whatnot. And the more that we see, the better that is, I think, for wrestling fans like me, because I remember a lot of these guys. So I always laugh when people who don't like AEW complain about, why is Tully Blanchard there? I'm like, because he's an old former wrestler who's a manager now. Totally normal thing that happened all the time. Remember the $1 Million Corporation? What was the leader of that faction's name? I forgot. Former wrestler, a dollar sign. I forgot. Like it's so common, that what they're doing, and it's something that we really haven't seen in maybe 20 years or so, maybe even more. So fans today don't know that that's kind of the norm. They're so programmed, to think the way WWE presents their product over the last 2 decades, instead of realizing how fun wrestling really can be when you're just not phoning shit in every week. So the Hardys hit the nail on the head with how AEW values and treats legends. I love seeing the legends get involved. I don't want legends, a company relying on legends like WWE will do sometimes for WrestleMania. I don't want legends or managers stealing spotlights or necessarily away or anything like that, but they still are a very big part of the show. And to have them in some sort of managerial or coaching, executive consultant type of role, I should say, like William Regal just came in to do, same thing, is an excellent use for legends. And it gives them something real, substantial to do instead of just being out there in some throwaway segment that you'll forget in 2 days. So they're right. They are absolutely right. If you are a former world champion, or if you're a legend, or if you're a former star of the NWA, I would much rather see your face in AEW than WWE, because I know they're actually going to do something with you. It's kind of fun. Anyway, speaking of AEW, last thing I need to talk about before I get out of here, it sounds like that Marco Stunt and Joey Janela will not be returning to the company. Janela revealed in an interview with Denise Salcedo that he will not be resigning when his contract is up, I believe, on May 1st, and kind of elaborated on the Marco Stunt stuff as well, saying Marco hasn't been seen around. He claimed AEW has ghosted him and probably does not plan to bring him back in either. That we've already kind of known that. He's been absent from Jurassic Express for quite some time, and like I've said all along, when AEW started, all of that talent that was used to start up, a lot of that talent will fall off if AEW sees success, because then they will start signing big stars. You got to always start somewhere. You got to start with who's available. And those are the people who were available at the time. Things change. Now that AEW is 2.5, coming up on 3 years old here soon, more and more talent has become available. Major, mega, huge stars have come into the company, like Jericho and Moxley and Danielson and Punk. And you got Keith Lee there, and, Miro, and all sorts of guys that have been coming in from WWE when they started shedding all of their talent. Unfortunately, that's just the nature of the business. That's the way wrestling is. We love Marco. We love Janela. We wish them both the best. But there are going to be people who aren't going to be kept around. And I think what this does in some regards is that it does give AEW maybe a bad reputation backstage, how they handle things. I'm not against letting these contracts expire and letting these people go now that you have much better talent to work with. Even though I think Janela can be a moneymaker on the indie level, and I do like Janela a lot. Stuff he's doing with X-Pac is super fun. But when you look at AEW's roster currently, there really isn't much of a place for Janela. He should be a GCW and indie guy. You can probably make him a lot of money doing that, or a decent amount of money doing that. So I think Janela should do. I think Janela should book a match against Enzo from that little fight they had. Book an indie match. Like, you remember when Kevin Nash and Ricky Morton did the deal, after their little beef or whatever? I think Janela and Enzo should try something like that. I don't know what their personal relationship is. I know Janela kind of bitched out a little bit during that confrontation that was caught on camera between the two, but it could be a great way to start an indie program and could probably result in a pretty good payday for both. So I don't know, but in terms of guys like this not sticking around, I don't give a shit. It's business. It's the way it's always been. Now, one thing I do think AEW needs is some sort of talent relations department. I think Christopher Daniels is in charge of that. I think he's technically the head of talent relations, but it doesn't sound like it's really that cohesive. It sounds like a lot of guys are being ignored. The Chavo Guerrero stuff just recently happened. So these to me are just little problems in AEW that need to be fixed. AEW haters will use them as massive ammunition. Well, you see why Tony Khan's an idiot or whatever. I'm like, this is just shit that they need to fix and get better at. That's it. They will, trust me, because everything else they've sucked at, they've gotten better at. So I think this is another thing where the more AEW grows and the more big talent you have there working with agents and guys like that, you got to have some sort of infrastructure backstage. And they might have something I don't know about, but it sounds like Tony Khan is wearing one too many hats. And I think it's time to get some people in place to actually handle these things, not just wrestlers that are EVPs, but actually bring people in. Get yourself a Johnny Ace. Go find someone that is hated just as bad as that guy and put him in charge of talent relations, because as Jim Ross will tell you, it's a thankless job. And I think Jim Ross is another guy that maybe not be at the head of talent relations, but he could at least offer some advice on how to handle the stuff, maybe even recommend somebody for that role. So it's something that, if Daniels is in this role, I think his role needs to be extended and grown. And if he's not, I think somebody needs to do it from now on, or maybe even join him. Something needs to be a little bit more organized with that stuff in my mind. But the bottom line of guys like Marco and Janelle leaving, so what? It's going to happen. It's going to happen to WWE too. Look at all the people they've let go or released. They're not even getting released. Their contracts are just being allowed to lapse. They're still getting paid. Marco and Janelle have been on the payroll for months and months and months and not been seen on TV. So it's not like they're cutting them loose. They will just not be renewing their contract, which I think is not really that big a deal. So I just think maybe the way they handle it should be addressed, and they need to have a little bit more professionalism from that point of view instead of just deciding not to speak to somebody anymore when you don't want them to work there. There's got to be more going on than what they have currently. So that's one area that AEW needs to work on, for sure. Ain't going to deny it. That is it for my news notes of the podcast. I'm going to go over here and knock out some of these super chats, maybe mention a couple things about last night's SmackDown, and then I got a piece out of here. So appreciate you guys being here this afternoon. Yeah, Chavo was never signed, but he was ignored to some degree by Tony Khan, whatever that situation there was. It wasn't dealt with properly. Yeah, we can get into specifics if you want, Monique. That's not the point. The point is how Tony Khan and AEW handled these business, transactions and whatnot. They need to have a little bit more in place, I think, in terms of handling that type of stuff. They can afford it. They certainly can. I think Raheem is the next one. Yeah, Raheem Card. Appreciate the $2. Been subscribed to you since the build to WrestleMania 30. Holy shit, 2014, 8, count them, years ago. Right on, my friend. Thank you very much for being here and appreciate the kind words. Spaz, appreciate the $10 from you. Of course it's a work, right? Actually, I don't care if it is or not. It's not, but I'm having fun with it. Either it's a lie and he'll be back on Dynamite soon, or it's true. Man, you guys just won't let it go. It is not a work. It is not a work. Was never a work. He is not going back to AEW. He will be in WWE. This is crystal, sparkling clear to me, and I don't know why it can't be accepted by some. But Spaz, you're the man. Go sub to Spaz's YouTube channel. Show him some love. And if it's true, Stardust is going to get fast-tracked to the 24/7 belt. No, he won't. The only way Stardust is coming back is if Cody wants it to. I am telling you guys, a star the level of Cody with the leverage that he has with the two companies is not going to sign with WWE if he has a chance to be the 24/7 champion in a chicken suit. Not happening. So I promise you, he's protected. He's going to be treated like a big deal. There's the father, the guy that was spawned, or Cody was spawned from this man's loins. Dusty Rhodes is kind of a big deal in pro wrestling, and WWE, I think, is going to really use Cody to help the legacy of Dusty Rhodes as well. I think Cody's going to be a huge deal in WWE. So 24/7 title, no, is not happening. World title, it's up in the air. I think Cody will be world champion in the WWE. The reason I think that is because they have two titles. But I don't think he's in any real danger of having happened to him what happens to a lot of guys like Ali or Aleister Black or any guys that WWE just can't figure out what to do with. Cody watches. He's not fucking dumb. He watches what they do, and he listens to all the people that have come into AEW saying, oh, my God, I'm so glad to get out of that fucking circus. So I'm telling you, he's not going to just sign his life away to WWE when he has another company that's willing to not make him sign everything away, allow him to do outside stuff, and give him a lot of creative freedom. You don't just throw that away to be someone's slave. I don't care how much money he's making. So he will be treated well. I firmly believe it. Also, 10 more from Spaz. Holy crap. Also, thoughts on Big E, thoughts to Big E, thoughts to Scott Hall's loved ones, thoughts to your cat, thoughts to the chat, and thoughts to the worker of great mics. Happy Saturday. Same to you, man. Really been thinking about Big E a lot. He posted another video the other day of him just walking around his neighborhood with his taco meat out. And just happy to see him out and about back home, already exercising. Man, the dude, I wish I could handle, and I hope that when life really hits me with shitty things, I can handle it with even a shred of the positivity that Big E does. He's just an amazing human. Thoughts to your cat, little man, still doing well. Yesterday was the 4-week anniversary of me taking him to the animal hospital for one last ditch effort to see if they can do anything. And they said, basically, whenever you're comfortable, Greg, make the call, and you can probably put him down. I think it's time. But in the meantime, here's some steroids. Here's some antibiotics. Give that to him until you decide, and he instantly started getting better. It's 1 month later now, and he's full strength. He was not misdiagnosed or anything like that. He has what he has. What he has will take his life. But he's fighting it, and it's awesome. So appreciate that as well. Spaz, and that's a little bub update for those of you wondering. Did you have 10 more? Jesus, Spaz. Thank you for 10 more, dude. The week leading to WrestleMania. Anyone watching my show will get previews for Mania Night 1 and 2, Stand and Deliver. I forgot about Stand and Deliver. Impact's Multiverse of Matches and Ring of Honor Supercard of Honor. That's going to be in Dallas too, right? It will be your first Ring of Honor show. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm excited for WrestleMania weekend. There's going to be a lot going on. Sounds like there's going to be a lot going on all out weekend too with another Ring of Honor show. And I think WWE's trying to run a UK pay-per-view. So yeah, we got a big summer ahead of us coming up, guys. So buckle up. Monique, thank you very much, girl, for that 5 as well. Joined late, but what are your expectations for Cody in WWE? Is he going to be a top guy versus what you think the reality of him going back would be? We kind of just discussed all of that. I believe Cody will be a top guy in WWE, not top guy. I don't think he's going to be squashing Roman or Brock or anything like that. But like I said, there's 2 championships there, and I don't think he's going to be Roman, but I think he might be. I mean, if they gave Big E the title and Bobby Lashley, and there's guys that have gotten the run with the other title, I think Cody probably will too. I just don't know when, where, or how quickly all of this is going to happen. One thing I do feel pretty confident though is that Cody isn't going to show up in WWE and they are going to immediately bury him. He wouldn't go there if that's what they were going to do. So yeah, I think Cody will be just fine in WWE, and I'm really excited to see how it all goes. But Monique, scroll back a bit, rewind a little bit here in the podcast. I spent the first 45 minutes talking about Cody, and we laid out every possibility imaginable in terms of how he could be used, how he will be used, where he could be used, all that stuff. So make sure you check it out. I think that's it. I got to get out of here now because I got to head to work, but I appreciate you guys being here this afternoon. Thanks again for joining me for this little quick podcast today, but I really wanted to come up and talk about Cody and talk about Jeff Hardy. I thought those were important things to discuss. Don't forget, we're back up here tomorrow for a WrestleMania 18 watch along. Really looking forward to that. We'll watch Hogan, Rock, all that good stuff. What a show. Should be a blast. And I will join you guys tomorrow night, or hope you guys can join me tomorrow night for that. You guys have a great rest of your Saturday afternoon and evening, and we will see you tomorrow for WrestleMania.